This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and deal with some of the stuff that gets in the way of that. Our guests today are husband and wife couple Rebecca St James and Cubbie Fink. Rebecca, part of the hugely successful Smallbone family. You might know her brothers, Luke and Joel from For King and Country, and Cubbie, the one-time bassist for American indie pop band Foster the People, now onto his own creative endeavours, which we'll talk a little bit about in this conversation as they release their book, Lasting Ever, taking us in to life after I do, the highs and lows, the challenges of finding somebody in the dating world that shares the same Christian values that were important to each of these two, and also what you do when your idea of family life doesn't quite look like what you might imagine. Rebecca, Cubbie, why did you guys open up your lives like this at this stage?
I think, the word that comes to mind, and it's a really good question, is stewardship. I think I've always wanted to, probably since I was about 12 and really gave my gifts to God, just be a good steward of the gifts that he's given me and not shy away, I suppose, from opportunities that he gives me to share about him or to honor him in the arts. And so with this book, we were approached by a producer of Unsung Hero at the movie about our family that came out last year, really with this idea of a book. So it kind of came from the outside. We thought, maybe one day we'll write a book somewhere far down the track. Maybe when we were early married, I think we talked about it, or maybe even, in engagement. But it was really someone else just kind of saying, I think you've got a story that needs to be heard right now. And that was what was the defining moment for us with this.
Cubbie, what do you think it was about your story that was intriguing people, particularly about, your marriage, your lives? Was there something you thought, this is what people are needing to hear from us?
I think there's a couple of points. The thing that this producer that Rebecca referenced, the thing that he really identified was the fact that we've both journeyed through a lot. Rebecca had decades in Christian music. I had a long run in secular music, and we both came out of those industries and ministries and all the things that we walked through for many years relatively unscathed, but more importantly, with our faith still intact. And I think it's far too common of a story where people end up losing their faith in the midst of a journey similar to ours, or, similar can be defined in a lot of different ways. But the fact that we did face some hard times, we saw kind of from my perspective, saw some of the not so glamorous sides of fame and sort of the ugly side of fame, and Rebecca, has seen a lot in her world as well. And we chose to cling to Jesus. We chose to cling to Jesus in our marriage, walking through some pretty challenging times that we faced as a married couple in our little family. And I think getting to the other side of those hard things and still believing that the Word of God is true, still believing that God is good, and still believing that Jesus is who he said he is a testimony that we were proud to share. And I think it's one that we hope will encourage others to stand on those truths.
Yeah, and I want to touch on some of those in a moment, but I find it really intriguing when people would look at you two professionally from the outside. And as you've mentioned, Rebecca, you've had this long-standing career as a Christian in Christian music, and Cubbie as a Christian in a secular space. So often those are viewed as very distinct career paths to choose, and the choice of somebody who wants to be a Christian in whatever musical creative space, I feel like that's the choice they've got to make. Do I be an outspoken Christian and go wholly Christian in my brand and music, or do I do something that just reflects my creativity and I'm Christian within that? Do you guys see yourselves as having these kind of two different things that you've somehow found unity in the middle of, or is it not as distinct in your minds, those two different pathways?
That's also a really great question, and kind of a unique question, an insightful one. I think what surprised me about touring with Cubbie in our early days of marriage was how similar the worlds are in a lot of ways. And yeah, there's some trappings, I think, that are in the mainstream world, like drugs and alcohol and things that are not nearly so common in Christian music, thank the Lord. I mean, there are those temptations too. And I think some have fallen into that. But I think that the addiction component maybe, yeah, is just a little bit more common in the mainstream space. But venues, and I mean, we played some of the same venues. Like I remember like being in these places and for a festival or a larger event that they were playing, and how it feels to be on the road and the bus and just all of it, and some of the disciplines that you have to go to with your mind of like, this is an unreal world and it's kind of forced community and it's unusual. There was a lot more in common with the two worlds than what I thought there would be, having come solely from the Christian music space. And I think in some ways Christian music feels like the unwanted little brother like of mainstream music. It's like mainstream music is the cool big brother, but then Christian music's kind of tucked away a little bit, and the not cool one. And I think having seen both worlds, I don't know, like I think I became. It was amazing, like what I was able to witness with him and partner with him with the band, and the intent of their band really was to be Christians in that space and be honorable and kind of be mission oriented, especially in the early days of the band. But I think it also gave me an appreciation for Christian music.
Interestingly, it sounds like there'd be this desire a need to prove yourself, right? There's something you mentioned, especially in the book, about feeling like not enough. And then also collectively as a couple, like wanting to be heard, wanting your voices to be understood well. Has that idea of needing to prove yourselves in some way, is it accurate to say that's kind of been a thread there for you, like professionally and personally for each of you?
I don't know if it has necessarily. I don't think, I know for Rebecca, and she shares this quite frequently, music was never kind of the pinnacle of her focus, and it was never really the thing that she really wanted. And I think
Not my main dream.
not the dream of her life. And I think for me, I was fortunate enough to kind of find out or figure out who I was before I entered the public eye, having spent a couple of years on the mission field and really understanding my identity as a son of the Creator first. I was able to carry kind of that identity and that mindset into the professional space and into the creative world. As I stepped into LA, I really viewed LA as a mission field, and it was never, I never looked at it as this mountain to climb to kind of prove myself or to prove to the world that I was great. It was more, how can I enter this city with a heart to serve, understanding that my value and my identity does not come from anything that I achieve in this city. It's already grounded in reality. It's grounded in my identity in Christ. So there was never really a deep desire to climb the ladder or to be the biggest band in the world or I mean, all of that stuff is great, but without purpose, it's kind of meaningless. So I don't think it was ever even really a temptation. And even having left the band, I think there was a season of trying to figure out what was next. And when we lived a crazy life for, close to 7-8 years on the road. And suddenly I'm just at home with my family. And there are those feelings of like, do I still have value to bring to the world if I'm not on these stages? But I think that is when the enemy is able to get in and try and erode that sense of identity that Christ would want you to hang on to. And ultimately that's what has been the foundation for me through it all.
And I think one of the most attractive things really to me about Cub from moment one was his sense of security. Like I just sensed there was a quiet strength about him that was just very, very attractive to me. So I can kind of speak to that about him. I think for me, the not enough thing was just probably planted from doing music really young. I was 13 on my first tour in Australia with Carmen, opening for him, and I didn't study this. Like it was just kind of like a little bit of throwing you in the deep end. I didn't go to college for it. There was just no big old prep for it outside of having grown up around it with my dad being in the music space. But I think a lot of it had to do with that. But then, Cub was telling me the other day about a documentary that he watched on We Are the World when Michael Jackson and a lot of artists filmed that. Every single artist felt like I'm not enough and I'm an imposter. And if they only figure out that I'm not nearly as talented as everyone else here, they were insecure.
And
So I
these are
think it,
the biggest artists in the world. I
yeah,
mean, the
Yeah.
yeah,
biggest names
the
in
top,
pop
absolute
music.
top,
Yeah.
and they were insecure. So I think it's kind of true of every form of artistry is that you kind of wrestle with that too.
Yeah, I wonder if we could ever meet somebody who truly thinks they've arrived. And if you did, they're probably not a nice person. You probably wouldn't like them, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. Aussies definitely wouldn't like them. They'd
Oh,
be
no
like, tall
way.
puppy, cut them down.
Exactly. No, they're not invited to dinner. But you guys absolutely
Yeah.
would be completely. But I think there's something too that some of what you've just spoken about really touches on. Another theme in the relationship side of what you guys open up to us speaks about that ability to be whole individually, to know who you are, to have that secure sense of your identity before you enter a marriage relationship. You guys met relatively young, still in your kind of adulthood, but
Oh, you're so nice. We didn't feel young.
I consider it kind of young.
28 and 30.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But it's it's still a time of life where it's either you've kind of worked out most of who you are, or I think you're still trying to figure it out. How did you guys each come to a point where you felt secure enough in your own identities to say, yeah, I think I'm ready to find that person who complements me, but I'm not looking for them to complete me? How did you get there?
I mean, I think I married a lot later in life than what I would have pictured. I think I had hoped it would be early 20s, and that, I mean, I remember thinking, God will probably have me wait till I'm 28. That seemed like, oh, wow, that's kind of older. For me, it was 21 or, 23. But I was 32 when we met and 33 when we got married. And so I think there was just this kind of, I don't know, it was a natural maturing of God just doing the work in me over time. And I do remember the desire was strong for it my whole life. I mean, it was the main dream since very, very, very young, probably as soon as I could kind of go, oh, my mom's got a cool job being a mom. Like, this looks amazing. I was thinking of this. So, but I think God did bring me to a place of going, Lord, even if this dream doesn't happen, which would be so grievous to me and so devastating and so sad, help me just to trust you, even if life doesn't turn out the way that I want it to. And I think life often doesn't turn out the way that we want it to in various areas, Like for me, it was that feeling of what if, what if this main dream of my life doesn't happen? But I think there was a surrender in those years prior to meeting him that was good for me because I think I came into a deeper place of sense of God's got me no matter what. And then you become a parent and then you're like, oh, Lord, bless and keep these kids, please protect them. And, don't let anything tragic happen to them. That's my greatest fear is losing him or the kids. So then you wrestle again with surrendering over, okay, well, they're not my kids. They're yours, Lord. And you've got them. So I think life is that constant surrender and the giving back, and trying to release what we think we can control. And so I know in my Christian life, it's over and over that. It's just surrendering a new thing and a new thing being revealed of what I'm trying to control and then offering it to him.
Yeah. And Cubbie, did you feel like you were at the same kind of space of readiness when you met Rebecca? Were you there as well going, yeah, I know who I am. I think I'm ready for this. Or were you a little bit more unsure?
I feel like I was pretty ready as well. I too kind of grew up thinking that I would marry young. I figured somewhere between 21 and 23 is kind of what I had in my head. So grew up definitely desiring to be a husband, desiring to be a father, desiring to have a family. Grew up in a great family and in a great home. And so saw it modeled well and knew it was something that I really desired. And I think living in LA for as long as I did, I think the ideal woman that I thought I was holding out for became less and less of an attainable reality. It just seemed to not exist. So there was kind of an edging way of that hope, and the fact that we did meet in all places, LA is the least likely you would anticipate meeting a woman of this caliber, and just the fact that we had so much in common as far as what we wanted in a spouse
Shared
and the
values.
things that we held true to, and the long patience and the long suffering in trying to hold out for that person. So yeah, I do feel like I was ready. I feel like there was kind of the standard that I had in my head, and when I saw it embodied in Rebecca, it was like, yeah, this makes sense. I think it's an issue or a conversation about contentment too. It's I think again, living on the mission field, I came to understand contentment the way Paul talks about it in Philippians, where he says, I found a way to be content in all situations. And
Mm,
it's whether you have a lot or a little, or if you can't be content without the marriage, you're never going to be content in the marriage. If you can't be content without the job, you're never going to be content in the job. So I think it's our human nature to look to the thing to bring the contentment, but Christ wants to offer us contentment without the thing, without the tangibles.
mm.
It's resting to find contentment, and then it's from there that you can experience contentment in relationship.
Yeah, and when we talk about, the kind of qualities you guys were looking for, this like list that you both had in some ways, that's much more about like the faith side of things, and that person who would share, a clear value set that you both had was waiting to have sex before marriage, really following the principles of the true love waits, purity kind of movement, if you want to call it that as well. I think that's something that a lot of people, age doesn't necessarily matter, but just in modern culture, it can feel like no one exists that still follows those kind of principles. How did you hold out for the person that would meet you in that same kind of value system when I'm sure there was pressure, especially given you thought you were both going to marry younger than you did? How did you get through the wait?
I don't think that, meeting somebody who had been equally committed to waiting as I had was necessarily a deal breaker, because I think I was at the age where I'm like, I'm probably not going to find somebody who's waited like I have, or shares those exact values. But I want them to, if that has been their history, to like believe in that fully now, to kind of have asked God's forgiveness for that time and really believe in it for them and for our kids, that it's a really high value, because that's the testimony of a lot of people of like, well, yeah, I probably didn't know the importance of waiting, or I didn't see the beauty in it, and then I discovered that, and then I waited for the person that God had for me. So that's a lot of people's stories, and there's grace and forgiveness for all of us because we've all sinned. So, but the fact that we did share those values and he had stayed true is part of the miracle of us meeting, and the gift and the beauty of God preparing us for each other in that way. I'm just so thankful for that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of a kind of a mixed feeling around that whole true love waits thing, and some people have shared that it was damaging to them, or and I think the people that share that were under some form of legalism. It was just like, you're going to be shamed if you didn't wait, and it was just about ticking off a box, and it wasn't really coming from this place of God knows what's best for us. He's written in this instruction book for life called the Bible, the way that is best. And we're not all going to follow exactly that. All of us need, as I said before, that forgiveness. So, but for us, and that's what we share about in the book, for us, that movement was a good one. For us, that movement was an encouraging one. And it came from a place of, Lord, we love you and we believe in your way, and we believe in the way that you lay out in the Bible, and we want to live this way because of our love for you, and to honor that future spouse, and to practice faithfulness before marriage. So then it's even, I don't know, more of an instinctive, like you've practiced faithfulness and integrity before marriage, and I think it would come easier in marriage to stand strong in that as well if you've been practicing it in your life a lot. So I'm just thankful for the miracle of what God did, because I think in some ways it was unexpected for both of us.
Yeah, so Cubbie, I'll put it on you then to tell us the story of how you guys did meet, and the beauty of the fact that your paths crossed. How did that happen?
It was a philosophy group, which was kind of the common denominator in our love story. So there was a guy in LA that opened his home, invited young people in to chat about philosophy, and his heart was to basically lay a foundation for theology through philosophy. So there was some Christians, some non-Christians, a lot of varying ideas on life and the world, and led to a lot of spirited conversations. But a lot of people ended up coming to the Lord through that, and a handful of people ended up getting married through that group. But in the season that she got introduced to that group, I was actually not attending. I was busy on a TV show, so there was months where I was not part of that group. And then I start hearing this name being thrown around by friends and roommates. And I think they had a pretty good indication that we would probably hit it off if we ended up in the same room. And we finally did, and had one of those magical movie moments where we locked eyes from across the room, and time seemed to slow down, and the music hushed to a murmur, and there really was so much in that first look, and ended up spending most of that evening chatting, and I think we both had a pretty good indication from that point that there was something special.
Yeah. And people want to believe that then it's happily ever after, and, of course, that the sweetness of that continues. Does it seem to have been that way for you guys? Like, does the magic of that first moment, has it carried through, 20 years or so that you've been married now?
14 in about 2 weeks.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
still some, nearly a decade and a half, which feels, it feels substantial. And it feels like we've weathered some things. I think I had been told by someone, it was actually on a movie set once, that life, when you're married for a long time and you've gone through hard times, it just gets sweeter. Your life in your marriage gets sweeter. And I always logged that away of just like, wow. And I probably saw it in my parents' marriage, just the sweetness of that longevity and that friendship. And I think that's what we've found to be true. So it's almost like it just deepens and widens. And I remember, like, in the early days of probably dating, engagement, married, probably had to just weed out some insecurities and some fears, and like just quite a bit in me, like that, and we all have insecurities and fears, in any season of our lives. But I see this kind of refinement of our relationship that I would not go back. I would not go back to that kind of honeymoon era of just being married. I mean, there's a beauty to that, but the sense of security and establishedness is probably not a word, but sense of being established in your marriage is so much richer and better that, I'm thankful for the journey that we've gone through in the highs and the lows, because I think it's been the pain that we've walked through together that has enriched our marriage and is part of why we experience the sweetness that we do now.
I feel like some of the challenging times, at least what we see through the book, particularly relates to your journey to becoming parents, the number of miscarriages that were in that as well. Given, Rebecca, for you dreamed of being a mum for so long. When it came with hardship like that, how did that affect the dream for you?
To be honest, it felt very threatened. Like, it just... I'm one of 7. I'm the oldest of 7. So I think a bigger family was always what I saw myself having. And I think when we first got married, we probably talked about 4 kids And so to have one child, and it happened very easily, and, me fall pregnant in my mid-30s at that point. And for it to go so smoothly and well, I thought, oh, we're good. My mom never had any miscarriages. Like, I think I always knew that was a possibility starting later in life, because I was geriatric pregnancy on my first
It's such a bad term. I hate that.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And a lot more people are having their first pregnancy later in life now anyway. I mean, it is a more normal thing even now, than it was then. But I think I did struggle then when I had the secondary infertility and miscarried again, just going, what does this mean for my dreams about what family life would look like and for other children? And there was something instinctive that knew that we weren't meant to be just, like an only child family. Not that there's anything wrong with that for anybody else. It's more just that for us, we knew we were called to multiple children. And so it was just like, how's this going to happen? And then, beginning to go, well, do we feel called to adoption? Like, is that the path for us? Like, just a lot of questions. And so it was a really insecure time of us going, I don't know, we don't have control of this. Like, we can try and remain open and like pursue this, but we can't orchestrate life happening like this. It's a miracle. And so, we look at our 2 extra children that we have now, like we have 3, they're 11, 6 and 4, and it's just miracles. Like, I just treasure these little human beings. I'm just exceedingly thankful that the story ended up the way that it did, because it wasn't a given, and I knew that.
Yeah, and it's no wonder then that there is that feeling that you have of you don't want anything to happen to kids, you don't want anything to happen to Cubby.
Yes.
Like it's miracles right
It's,
around your household that are very precious, of course. And I mean, for you, Cubby, when you're the husband, when you're the male partner in a situation like this, and you're watching your wife go through miscarriages, how does that affect you from that side of the equation? Because for the woman, we talk about miscarriage, it's a very physical thing, it's a very personal, intimate thing. But when you're the partner there alongside of that, how did that affect you?
I think it honestly affected me far deeper emotionally than I probably would have anticipated because I mean you hear about the stories of miscarriage and I think before you experience it, it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that it's actually a child that you're losing and the hopes and the dreams that you have for that child almost instantaneously as soon as you find out that you're pregnant, you feel bonded to this
mm,
child,
yeah.
and there's an excitement of being able to do life with this little child, and so having not experienced that before marriage, it's hard to wrap your head around how you could be so emotionally tied to something that is still so far from being in the world,
Mm,
but it did strike me pretty deep to the core and was incredibly devastating, and I think as a man there's, a very natural inclination to just want to do something to help, and there's just very little you can do outside of just emotionally tend to and care for and love her through the pain. But it's a tough feeling to feel like your hands are tied and there's nothing you can do about it.
When you go through winter seasons like that, as the way you guys describe it in the book, how does that affect your relationship with each other? Like, is it something that you think bonds us deeply when we experience winters, or can it be something that makes us a little bit more isolated in our pain?
I think it can go either way, and I think it can go like pain can go either way in any relationship or any season of life. We've all heard the phrase, you either become bitter or better. And I think depending on the way that we view the pain, it can either be absolutely threatening, which I think is that normal instinct, like human instinct to go, I don't want this, this is terrible, and I'm caught up in it and I'm trying to resist it. But I think in this season of my life, I'm trying to actively think about discomfort or pain or any kind of like probably hope deferred kind of situations where it's like, oh, it's not yet, and you've got to kind of wait for something, and you're sad or you're grieved about something, instead of going, okay, that's something that I've got to resist. More just going, okay, God's probably got something beautiful here in this. There's things that he can do in me that, and growing me in my relationship with him or Cubby, or even a friendship, like friends that you're journeying through life with, or mentors. Like he can do so much in those relationships and so much in us through the pain. And so I'm trying to be a bit more intentional about that the winter season doesn't have to be so threatening, because I think in my life I have felt that, in the pain. It's just like, I don't want this. But there's a lot of good. And I mean, it's similar to the song in the movie, You Make Everything Beautiful, like looking at God and going, God, you are in the business of restoring and redemption and bringing beauty from ashes. And that's the hope we have.
Yeah. And what about you, Cubby? How do you feel like the winters affect your relationship to each other and perhaps to God?
The winter season that we refer to in the book was unique for me. I mean, not only were we dealing with a lot of hard, it was a pretty traumatic parting ways with the band. Obviously, the miscarriages that we talked about. My mom was dying of a disease. It was just everywhere we looked, the landscape of our life just was challenging, and it just felt like we were under 20 feet of snow and didn't couldn't really see a way out. And I think on top of all that, the thing that it made it the most challenging for me was that season was marked by silence. At every other turning point in my life, every other crossroad that I had arrived at, the Lord was exponentially clear. I mean, as close to an audible voice from the Lord that you can experience, in Him saying, all right, this is the way you're going, and this is what you're going to be doing, and this is how you're going to be doing it. It was just, He just seemed to lay things out for me very clearly. And suddenly I'm in a position where I've got a wife and a young daughter, and I'm meant to be the provider of this family. And thrown into the complete unknown and don't even know where the crossroad is, and desperately crying out for direction from the Lord and just being met with silence. And it was really the first time in my life where I was forced to actually live by faith. For years prior to that, I had a faith in Jesus and I had a belief in God and believing that he was who he said he was. But suddenly I was forced to, the rubber met the road. And it's like, okay, I've said I believe these things. Do I actually believe them? And it was a moment where I actually had to stand on the faith that I claimed I had, put it into action, and have that faith carry me through despite the silence and despite the pain and despite the hardship, and continue to trust that God is good despite our circumstances. And I think in seasons of pain, it's probably a very natural inclination to want to retreat, to want to isolate, to want to run to your own corner. And especially in marriage, I definitely had to overcome that inclination because I'm much more of an introvert, much more of an internal processor, not a verbal processor. Much easier for me to kind of just be the lone wolf and do my own thing and my little corner. And I really had to be intentional about not letting that inclination take over me and my being and my countenance and all of it. And really continue to pursue Rebecca in that season. And she talks about curiosity being what she deems the sixth love language, and really learning what that means in our relationship, and kind of breaking through that wall of assumption. I could assume what's going on in her, but actually asking the questions and drawing her out. And that was something that was definitely learned in that season.
Yeah, and I would feel so loved and do feel so loved when he like asks me things, and draws me out and shows curiosity. I think the thing too that, in thinking about your question a little bit more, I think what we got through, I mean, there was a lot that we learned, I think, through the winter season and through other trials that we've gone through in our lives too. But it's marriage equity. I had somebody say that. It's like when you go through the fire and you've sobbed in each other's arms and held each other and turned to God in prayer and like, kind of clung to God and each other, you've got marriage equity. And there's almost this sense of deepened trust, deepened faith in what you have. And it's like this beautiful refining thing. And so, you do end up being thankful for it on the other side of it. Not quite in the middle. It's hard to be in the middle, but on the other side of it, much more. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because, I mean, the Bible tells us, Jesus himself says, we will have trials, we will have troubles in this world. And when you say your vows, it's for better or worse. Like there is an expectation that challenge will come, that there's going to be these difficult phases. Why do you think we can sometimes feel like it's such a big surprise then, and it's such a big shock when we actually arrive at these times? Like, do we have this inherent assumption that we're the exception from the rule or something like that?
I think we are creatures of comfort. Everything that we've done in the history of humanity is to make our lives as comfortable as possible and as pain-free as possible, and suffering, free as possible. And I think it's a lie that culture tries to sell us, especially in the West, is that, pain is not good. Pain should be avoided. You should do everything that makes you happy. And I think Jesus, in the way he spoke about suffering, it's something that should be embraced. It's something that should be, James says, consider it joy when you face troubles of any kind, because it's that pain and those troubled circumstances that's actually bringing the good stuff to the surface and forcing you to grow and forcing you to overcome. And I think it is partly cultural, but I also think it's because the West has influenced so much of the world. It really is kind of just a global mindset now that pain should be avoided at all costs. But and I think we still are surprised by it because it's very easy to kind of buy into that cultural norm, and we got to have our nice little house and our nice little family, and if anything goes awry, then we kind of freak out. So it's constantly breaking that cultural mindset and just remembering, that's the one thing Christ promised us, was that we will suffer. And what are we going to do with that suffering? That's the question.
And I also think, there's this innate longing for heaven in all of us. I think we know that we were built for a perfect life, like for it to be sin-free and pain-free. And I think we know that deep down that like something's wrong, like it just feels wrong. So it's almost like we're constantly just going, oh, soon I'm going to arrive, I'm going to get it together, and I'm going to figure this whole life thing out, and I'm going to arrive at this perfect space. Well, yeah, best wishes with that, but probably not, heaven on earth. It isn't the exact reality for most of us, and probably none of us. So yeah, I think just even acknowledging that, like heaven coming, but it's not yet. And I think that helps as well.
How do we get to a springtime then? You guys have both, perhaps through time and circumstance, found yourself in what you've called spring in this season. How do you get there?
I don't think it's something that you can necessarily control or orchestrate. And in a similar fashion, we don't really have the power to put the leaves back on the trees. They just come when the time is right, when the sun is in the right, shining from the right direction. And it's something that you kind of have to walk through the winter until the season begins to change. And ultimately for us, it was something that really we sensed a spring dawning in our heart before anything in our tangible world changed. And it was something that we were kind of living in that season of darkness where we barely had enough light to put one foot in front of the other, but we were faithful to just try and do that. And ultimately,
and trust his goodness in that.
Totally. Yeah. And ultimately it led to a moment where the silence was broken for me and I felt the Lord start speaking again. It was a very strange word that I heard, but what I heard was running, which didn't seem to make sense. But when I sat with it and prayed through it, was very clear that God was saying, you are running from the thing I created you to do. In that season, there was just a lot of pain associated with kind of the arts world. And I desperately wanted something that made sense, something where A plus B equals C. In the arts world, that never happens. B never equals C. So I just wanted something that made sense. Rebecca was struggling with a lot also, and kind of from a different angle, but hearing him say that and realizing, yes, I actually have been running from the thing you've created me to do. An unbelievable amount of inspiration and vision and direction and hope for the future just started blossoming in my heart. And it wasn't like, and in that time I was trying to figure out what to do with my life and trying to figure out how to make money for my family. So it wasn't like this job was just landed in my lap. It was more just inspiration that came to my heart. And then that opened the door for us to be able to dream and step into new areas of life and explore things. And for Rebecca, it was a similar thing where she felt God speak
in worship
and felt a sense of her being nudged back into ministry through music. And it was just like spring had sprung, and again, nothing tangible. And then the tangible evidence of that spring was she fell pregnant. I mean, just
very shortly after
weeks
that
of kind of the spring coming to our hearts. So again, I think it's too easy in those hard winter seasons to just look to the thing that's going to make you happy, the job or whatever it might be, to draw you out. But I think just being patient and waiting for the slow blossoms of those tree buds and the shoots of grass to start to grow on their own, because it's really only the Holy Spirit that can cause growth and cause that kind of growth and can cause a change of season.